Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Magick Occult Radio. I am your host, Taliesin McKnight, together with my co-host, the Vayu Tiger, and today we are interviewing Ian Corrigan. And today's discussion is Druidism and Celtic magic. Now, Ian is a senior priest and Archdruid Emeritus of Arndriocht Fane. I hope I'm saying that right, which is a Druid order. And Ian Corrigan was a colleague of Isaac Bonwitz in the development of that pagan system. Ian is the author of several occult books on paganism and magic. Ian wrote some of the books that he has authored, the Book of Nine Moons. Ian wrote the Book of the Dragon, a new grimoire, grammary, charms, and incantations, and he wrote the Portal Book, Teachings and Works of Celtic Witchcraft, and many others. Obviously, I can't go into every book that he wrote, but he has written some really good material on Celtic magic, so it's a pleasure to have Ian Corrigan on the show with us today. So I bring you
hello, Taliesin.
And to Ian. So how are you guys doing today?
Just fine.
Fantastic. It's a good day. Pretty cold, but I'm enjoying it.
It's 11 o'clock on the East Coast. I'm up with the big kids, so it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on. Taliesin, your discussion group on Facebook was one of the first kind of non-Druid, non-Celtic or Druid groups that I signed on to on Facebook, and it has remained one of my favorites as a place where you can have real conversations about magic and the occult with a minimum of Facebook BS. And that's because you're a good moderator, so I'm very glad to be on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. We've got Magic Studies group on Facebook, so it's a pretty thriving community. And like you said, with moderating, we don't put up with any BS. But yeah,
but it
it's
stays
great.
lively.
Yeah, I've been wanting to have you on here for a while because we haven't really had a whole lot on paganism, and so yeah, I'm really glad to have you on the show. So, guys, let's go ahead and dive on in. Ian,
that's fine.
For those that are not familiar, what is Druidism?
That's a very general question. We're going to just start right at the top, I suppose. I must put the disclaimer at the front that whatever my experience and opinions, my opinions are my own. And like anything in paganism, magic, religion, or the occult, personal opinions on these matters can vary widely, and people can reach widely different conclusions by reading the same sources. So anybody out there who immediately decides that I'm full of your favorite whatever, you may be right, but I can only present these things as my opinions. So we'll go to in the historical sense, Taliesin, Druidry. Let me start from another end. Druids were the priest and intellectual class among the Celtic tribes. Now, by Celtic, I mean people who spoke Celtic languages, and that runs from Central and Northern Europe through Western Europe into the British Isles. People tend to think of the Irish and Welsh and Scots as Celts, and they are among the remnants of Celtic-speaking peoples in Europe, along with the Manx and the Bretons and the Cornish. But it's all scraps and tatters of what was once in, say, the turn of the millennium in the 1st century, around the time of Christ, and a century before that, was once one of the great cultures of Europe north of the Alps, north of Italy and Greece. The Druids, it's not unfair to think of them as being like the Hindu Brahmins, a caste of priests and intellectuals who not only kept the religious lore of the people, that is, the ritual performance, the songs and poems, the histories and legends, and what we would call the myths, but were also the physicians and the jurists and the, in many cases, the diplomats of the Celtic peoples. To be a Druid was probably to be a member of a Druid family in those days. If you were sufficiently noble, your granddad had been a Druid, and that made you extra noble among the Celts. And here we're talking about a period of history. To be conservative, as I always prefer to be, that would start around 500 or 400 BC and end around 100 AD, when the Romans finally outlaw the Druids in their conquered areas and burn out the Isle of Mona off the shore of Wales. A story I won't tell you in detail right now for the sake of time, but Celtic culture and the Celtic pagan religion of that culture continued even after the official priesthood of that culture was outlawed and largely driven away. That priesthood continued underground. It continued in Ireland well after it had been suppressed in Roman Britain and Gaul. But by the, to be conservative, 600s or 700s, you would have seen perhaps the last of people who actually called themselves Druids in the old sense. Then you find yourself with a period of about 1,000 years that brings us up to the 18th century, shall we say, the middle 1700s, when Masonry and fraternalism were all the fashion among the post-Reformation Brits and French. And here we probably bump up against some history you know, Taliesin. The Masonry was spreading throughout the middle and upper classes, and about the same time, certain ancient works were translated into English, like Caesar's Gaulish Wars were translated into English, and Brits started to notice these Celtic ancestors. Medieval people didn't know who Celts were. They never heard the word. It simply didn't exist. The word, the idea of the Celts was rediscovered in the early modern period in Britain by these new translations of ancient literature. And it excited the British to discover that they had an indigenous ancestry other than the Romans. The general idea had been, modern Britain, medieval Britain, King Arthur Britain, Roman Britain, cavemen. Going back through time. And to discover that there was a noble, civilized, and philosophical people who they immediately, incidentally, decided had built Stonehenge. That was the first thing they decided when they discovered the Celts. Nobody knew who built Stonehenge at all in that period. So when they discovered the Celts, They figured it must have been the Celts. It turned out not to be the case. So this discovery of the Druids, combined with the impulse to fraternalism and the creation of fraternal orders, and a number of Druidic revival orders and organizations were created there in the 1750s through the early 1800s. Most notably, over in Wales, a couple of important scholars, controversial scholars, reconstructed some ceremonial work, half Masonry, half Welsh folklore, and attached it to the traditional bardic competitions of Wales, and to this day, the Gorsedd of Bards meets in Wales and performs quote-unquote Druidic ceremonies written by these fraternalists in the 18th and early 19th century. So there's an actual, 200 to 300 year tradition of some of these branches of British Druid revival. However, they all come from roots grown from literary and cultural sources, and not, in my opinion, inherited through history from the ancient Druids, who basically were snuffed, forgive me, somewhere before the turn of the second millennium. Now, how does all that get into neo-paganism? Two interesting routes. First, in Britain, in about the 1940s, Gerald Gardner is, you know that name, don't you, is chums with a fella named Ross Nichols. Do you know that name?
Ross Nichols. I mean, of course I know Gardner. Ross Nichols.
Of course.
I'm not sure.
I'm going to take that for no. Ross Nichols was the founder of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. OBOD. Still one of the, right now probably the single largest Druidic, neo-Druidic organization in existence. He was a fellow nudist with Gardner there on the edge of the New Forest in the 1940s, and they would hang out in the nudist camp and talk mythology, and between them, Ross Nichols and Gerald Gardner, they devised the eightfold wheel of the year. Druids had always celebrated, these fraternal Druids had always celebrated the solstices and equinoxes. Stonehenge is lined up to the solstices. The other megalithic remains are lined up to the equinoxes, and these fraternal Druids had always celebrated the solstices and equinoxes. Gardner and Nichols located the four Celtic festival days. Walpurgisnacht, Halloween, and the two in between, the February feast, which is Imbolg in Ireland, and the August feast, which is Lunasa in Ireland. And so they basically combined the Druidic custom of keeping the solstices and equinoxes with these witches' Sabbath lore things about May Day and All Hallows Eve, etc., and put together and created the eightfold wheel of the year, which was then adopted by both Gardner's witchcraft and by Nichols' new reformation of British Druidry called the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. So the eightfold wheel of the year was launched in two sources at about the same time there in the middle 50s, and of course is one of the most influential creations out of all of that. The whole eightfold wheel is celebrated widely around paganism, but its real origins go no further back than that. It is a modern synthesis. So that's one angle in which Druidry kind of works its way into neo-paganism. But I'll tell you a funny story from North America. Now we just have to leave all this British fraternalism and the shadow of the stones on Salisbury Plain behind for a minute, and go with me to Carleton College in Minnesota. I think might have been Wisconsin, but I think it's Minnesota. In the early 60s. Now, at Carleton College in Minnesota in the early 60s, they had a chapel requirement. Every young man at the campus was required to attend the worship service of their choice once a week. So a few of these lads decided that they would go to the top of the hill where there was an oak tree with a bottle of whiskey and read passages from the world's sacred scriptures, salute the sun, bless glasses of whiskey, and pass the sacrament. And that simple and they called themselves Reformed Druids in an effort to convince Carleton College that they were meeting their chapel requirement. They were Reformed Druids, incidentally, they said, because they had decided to give up human sacrifice. We thank them for that, and we've clung to that tradition. They got away with it, and the way the story is always told, they say that what began in mockery was continued in reverence, and they found their business actually spiritually satisfying. They began to write their own little epistles to each other, and somewhere around 1967 or 8, a young freshman named Isaac Bonowitz turns up at Carleton College. Oh, maybe that's not right. No, I think it is. And is initiated as a Druid priest by these folks. Now, Isaac goes on to have a fairly famous career as an occultist. He was the editor of Gnostica magazine for Llewellyn for several years. He wrote a seminal book called Real Magic and a number of other books later in life, and of course founded in the end ADF. And the reason that he founded ADF is that in his whole big occult career, he never stopped identifying himself as a Druid, with his first important initiation there at Carleton College. So it's by his effort that a major organization gets founded in North America, completely separate from the British revival lineages, not connected in any way. Now there's crossover membership now, but not connected historically in any way. 1983, Samhain of 1983 is the official founding date of Arnriach Féin, which means in Irish, our own Druidry, or our kind of Druidry, by which we mean to say it doesn't have to be everybody's kind of Druidry. this one's ours, and so we're doing it our way. And we have said, and by we, I was kind of there. I didn't really join for a few years, but I was kind of around the festivals where Isaac was doing this and participating in conversations from the outset. And he always made the point that this would be a new, independent lineage of pagan work that didn't claim to be inherited from the ancient past, that didn't claim secret chiefs or spiritual masters at the background. This would be a new system that we American pagans and occultists would build as we went, and that is how it has gone. For now, getting closer to 35 than 30 years. We celebrated our 30th anniversary in 2013. So we continue on. ADF now probably has congregations, public congregations in 30 North American cities, a couple of thousand standing members, but we serve a much larger community than that by providing public worship at each of those 8 high days. Our rituals are always open and free to attend for every sincere, as we always say, every sincere pagan and every polite inquirer is welcome at our public worship. So if you're out there looking, here I'll plug. This is plug number 1, and it won't be the last of the evening. If you're out there looking for a group with which to celebrate the pagan holidays, if there's an ADF Grove in your region, they'll be doing them, and you'll be welcome. So that's kind of the context and the history of the context that I'm doing all this in. Shall I just go on? Let me talk about cosmology a little bit and what Celtic paganism is actually sort of like. So the big difference for me, I grew up doing Wicca and very kind of post-Golden Dawn Wicca, if you know what I mean. Four tools, the four-quartered direction, the four-quartered circle in the four directions, the Tarot, Hermetic Kabbalah. That was all part of my early Wiccan experience. But as we, over the years, began to examine what the real content of European mythology was, Hermeticism and the Golden Dawn Kabbalah became less and less relevant. Let me skip some intervening steps there and just say that in the end, many of us have abandoned large segments of the traditional Western occult symbolism. I no longer work with the idea of 4 elements. Rather, I work with the idea of 3 realms, land, sea, and sky, with the sacred ritual fire in the center. Do you know what I mean when I refer? Do you know what I mean when I refer to the symbol called the Triskel or the Triskelion? 3 spirals coming out.
I've heard of it, but I can't recall it.
It's 3 spirals coming out from a central point. The famous one is on the curbstone at Brunaboyne in Ireland, but we use kind of that symbol to symbolize the 3 realms of land, sea, and sky that all meet in the center where the sacred fire is. And you'll remember that in this is not just Celtic. This is Indo-European in general, so it applies to most European mythologies. For instance, in standard Hellenic mythology, the gods divide the world into land, sea, and sky. Hades rules the land, the underworld. Poseidon rules the sea, and Zeus rules the sky. The 3 brothers are given the 3 realms, and of course Hecate is given the keys to all 3 realms, or the underworld, middle world, and heavens, however you care to measure that. But we build a ritual and symbolic system around land, sea, and sky, and fire in the center, instead of the quartered circle, the cross with a 5th thing in the center. And we have abandoned the idea, how can I put it? Mostly we've abandoned Neoplatonism. We have abandoned the idea that Earth is the bottom rung of a ladder.
Right. So,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I've been talking.
So basically, most of us are familiar with Western esotericism. You know, like you said, Golden Dawn, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, all of that stuff. I mean, and that's basically our Western. What you're saying is that y'all are breaking away from all that and saying, hey, look at this. Look at what they're doing in Northern Europe. Because, like the Western esotericism, it's mostly like, I mean, it's based in, I guess, around the Mediterranean, Rico, Roman
yes,
and with Gnosticism, and then filtered through Christianity and Kabbalah and developed. And the Romans brought that over into Europe, and your Latin grimoires and on and on. But what you're saying is
yes, and finally all filtered through the Renaissance magicians.
Right.
In the end, filtered through Agrippa and Ficino and Bruno and the Renaissance magicians, which made it thoroughly Christianized and reclassicized. But never mind. So, if I were to, what we're looking for is a more pagan worldview. We want to push back past Agrippa. We want to push back past the the synthesis that's present in the Greco-Egyptian papyri. We want to push back past Plato to, sometimes I describe the religious part of what we do. We'll get to occultism in a minute, but sometimes I describe the religious part of what we do in ADF and in our kind, and in a lot of Reconstructionist paganism, I think I'm safe to say, as a more Homeric religion. Like Homer, the famous mythic poet, wrote the Odyssey, etc. So, in a kind of Homeric religion, the gods are the gods are in the world, humans sacrifice to the gods, and the gods bless the humans.
So in a more naturalistic
it's real
way,
direct. There's no... Go ahead.
So you're right, what you're establishing is more natural. Some of it isn't even much as taught through, what magicians read through books. You guys are going more, putting your hands into dirt and, going more primitive.
We are doing that. That is not unfair at all. Primitive can be a complicated word, but I don't do it. But let's go with archaic, shall we?
Okay.
By which I mean really old. As all some of our theorists have been heard to say as paleo as possible under the circumstances. So, for instance, our organization, ADF, being committed to public worship in North America, has abandoned animal sacrifice. That's central to European religion, to old European religion. We replace it just as pagans were already starting to do at the end of the pagan era. We replace animal sacrifice with other kinds of food offerings. We pour wine. We spill whole bottles of whiskey if we want to make a big offering. Whole pots of porridge go into the ground. We try to do big sacrifices when needed, but we draw the line at offering life, mostly because we would make, not mostly, but not the least of which is because we would almost surely make a terrible mess. If we attempted to offer a goat in my backyard.
Sorry.
So,
I just wanted to announce to everyone that we're about to go off of the live portion, and we're about to go into the archive. So if you are listening live, if you check back, it will be archived, and you will be able to click on the same link that you're going to tune in on the live show. You'll be able to click on that anytime and listen, and these will also be uploaded to YouTube. So I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
I see. So we're just doing a half-hour live. That's fine. Well, let me then just go ahead and try to move toward the occult ideas that grow out of some of this. Of course, we haven't had a lot of time to do the background. I'd advise someone to find my primary book on the basics of this kind of system called Sacred Fire, Holy Well. That's available from Amazon. If you want to read it in more detail, or spend the $30, join ADF, and get the 150-page book that comes with that, along with a bunch of other resources. It's a light investment for 1 year of involvement. But anyway, I, by inclination, dig the sorcery and magic end of spirituality. My early inclinations were toward grimoire magic, witchcraft, craft, whatever that meant. The word appealed to me, and the idea of, well, it's not unfair to say the idea of wielding spiritual power, whatever that means. We're discussing my motivations when I was 16. I can't say they were sophisticated. I have stuck with my interest in all of this, as I have, I hope, matured to some degree. And now I think of this as technical spirituality. You know, you can do spirituality kind of tra-la, let's walk through the woods and let the sun fall on my face kind of spirituality, and I try to do some of that every week if I get a chance. But you can take a more technical viewpoint in which one, you know, works with symbols and artistic applications and intention in such a way as to produce deliberate spiritual effects and even effects in the common world. That's kind of a long way around to my definition of magic, right? My definition of magic is the application of spiritual arts for personally willed goals. And so that's kind of how... Pardon?
I was wanting to ask, because like you said with, of course, with Druidism, you're working with the gods and goddesses, with the deities. You're working with the spirits, the ancestors.
Yes,
I was wondering if we can go in really briefly into the different models of magic, the spirit, energy, and consciousness model.
Oh yes, this is a rap I give pretty often, so yeah, I can do that for you. I kind of analyze occult practice into a laundry list of styles and types, and I'm not the only one to do it, and there are various models that are approximately the same as this. But if I were to divide it up in the ways that seem obvious to me, the top division is into either energy, magic, and all these terms are too general, forgive me, but into energy magic or spirit magic. Pardon me. Use my mute button. And as kind of subsets or lesser categories, we can talk about symbol or letter-based magic and natural magic, which is sort of the powers of herbs and stones kind of thing. But the basic division that I think is worth addressing in modern occultism is the distinction between energy magic and spirit art. In traditional magic, certainly in the West, nobody ever heard, in Agrippa's time, nobody ever heard of magical energies. Magic did not involve for a English cunning man or a Renaissance mage. Magic did not involve channeling energies through the body and directing them with the imagination. Magic involved summoning beings in the spiritual world and getting them to help you. Let me do this rap quickly, because in the modern age, well, in until the modern age, before the technological age, if you needed to get a breeze, if it was hot in your room and you needed to get a breeze and you didn't want to run your own fan, you basically had to talk somebody into fanning you. You had to arrange with another living being, either by payment or by rank or by coercion, if you had to. to do what you wanted, to pull the rope and move the fan or swing the fan. In our time, if we want a breeze on a hot day, we plug a machine into a source of impersonal energy, and lo, there is a breeze.
Right.
I believe that magic always imitates technology, all the way back from the invention of letters, or the invention of fire, probably. Magic has always patterned itself on what humans have learned to do with the material world. So once radio was invented and we discovered you could get messages out of the air on a quartz crystal, quartz crystals began to have more importance in magic. So never mind that metaphor, but I hope you take my point. In our time, impersonal energies have many young magicians that I talk to will tell you that the core of magic is learning to operate these impersonal energies in the world. What I don't like about that myself is that I like a spirituality that is based on relationship.
Right.
I'm looking for spirituality that's based on the relationship between me and the divine. And by the divine, I mean all the spirits. I'm a polytheist. I never think of the divine as one thing. You can't. I don't think of nature as one thing. You can't have a relationship with nature as a whole. You can have a relationship with your front yard. You can have a relationship with that river across the hill. But you can't have a relationship with nature as a whole. And in the same way, I don't think you can have a relationship with the divine as a whole. That's why I'm a polytheist. You have to relate to the spirits as you find them. So building a magic that is about, once again, relationship with the spirits, I have found very satisfying.
Could you talk a little bit about your evocations and things like that?
Yes. Yes, I'm heading right there. The thing that has put pagans off from grimoire magic over the years, two things I would say. First, it's, overtly Christian context. By the time you get the early modern grimoires, especially in England and France in the 18th century, Honorius and the Grand Grimoire and all of those late books, it's utterly Christianized. It's very difficult to find anything that's not Christian mythology in it, and that puts pagans off. Second, the thing that puts pagans off is the coercive and abusive relationship with the spirits that is often displayed. Because a lot of the spirits you're summoning are quote-unquote demons, therefore unworthy of respect and deserving only to be slapped around with an ebony wand until they do what they're told. That hasn't appealed to pagans either. So, as I set out to devise a spirit contact system based on the patterns in the grimoires, but acceptable in a pagan context, which is what I've been doing, I decided to attempt to remedy both of those problems. So, my system is firmly based in worship of, sacrifice to, the blessing of specific pagan deities. That could be any pagan deity. If you were applying it generally at home, you could work it with Zeus, you could work it with Dionysus, you can work it with any, I use Celtic gods, but I use examples that people know the names of instead of my Irish gods. I have done one major suite of work with all of this and a couple of smaller ones and one that I'm involved in right now. The major suite that I did a couple of years ago was work with the spirits associated with the Irish goddess Brighid. She's one of the most popular Celtic goddesses in the whole reform revival movement, and is the goddess both of the hearth and of a kind of motherly nurturing, but also of artistic inspiration in terms of the poet, the healer, and the smith, the metal smith. All three of those were considered to be connected with sacred fire and water, and to be under the power of the goddess Brighid. So I applied the classic hierarchical model of evocation, starting by offering to the goddess, that is the chief god of the rite, whichever one you're doing, but in my case the goddess Brighid, and gaining her blessing. And in our Druidic ritual style, we use divination in the course of ritual to make sure that we're all lined up with the gods and spirits as we go. Invoked, and this is almost the most tenuous moment in the outline, invoked through or from the goddess three chieftains or chief ministers or elder sisters of the goddess who I essentially put at what you might call the archangelic level, if you were being sort of Neoplatonist about it. Do you take my meaning?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And then with those, and then with all of those powers invoked, and with their blessing, we called for the host of spirits to appear and for individual spirits to appear out of the host of spirits and give us their names and powers. A lot of people, when you think about the grimoires, a lot of people think about the catalogs of spirits. You know what I mean? Like the 72 princes in the Goetia of Solomon, or the list of spirits in the Grimorium Verum. But if you go to the greater key of Solomon first, you find that the primary instruction there is in how to summon a host of spirits and have individual members of them stand forth and identify themselves.
Right.
It seems to me that the catalogs that we have, I mean, the Goetia catalog comes from a literary tradition that precedes it. It's not just some guy's evocation results. But I think in some cases we are seeing the results of evocations written up and handed down to, those who come after the magician. Here are the spirits I found and what I've been able to do with them. So we were kind of going back to first principles and applying that in a pagan context. And the first time that I actually did the full rite of this, and maybe I wouldn't have done it this way in retrospect, but it worked. We did it as part of a public, semi-public, as part of a festival ritual. And the only reason that I thought I could get away with this is that I knew that attending that festival ritual would be up to a dozen of our trained ADF priesthood. So I knew that I would have pretty reliable seers in the quote-unquote audience of that ritual. And it worked. My wife and I, she's my equal historically and skill-wise in every way. She's just not a loudmouth like me.
Hey, Ian, I hate to cut you short.
Are we done? All right.
Yeah, it looks like we're about to go off of here. So
okay, here come the plugs. Here come the plugs for the sake of the recording. My big book, Sacred Fire Holy Well, is available on Amazon.com. You can see all of my other publications at lulu.com/Tredara, Tredara. That includes the Book of Summoning, where I lay this evocation stuff out in great detail.
Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
Yeah.